Leadership law number 2, the law of influence. The true measure of leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. If you don't have influence, you will never be able to lead others. So how do you measure influence? Here's a story to answer that question. In a 1996 poll published by the London Daily Mail, Princess Diana and Mother Teresa were voted in first and second places as the world's 2 most caring people. That's something that doesn't happen unless you have a lot of influence. How did someone like Diana come to be regarded in the same way as Mother Teresa? The answer is that she demonstrated the power of the law of influence. In 1981, Diana became the most talked about person on the globe when she married Prince Charles of England. Nearly 1 billion people watched Diana's wedding ceremony televised from St. Paul's Cathedral. And from that day on, it seemed people could never get enough news about her. At first, she seemed painfully shy and totally overwhelmed by all the attention she and her new husband were receiving. However, in time, she adjusted to her new role. As she started traveling and representing the royal family around the world at various functions, she built many important relationships with politicians, organizers of humanitarian causes, entertainers, and heads of state. At first, she was simply a spokesperson, a catalyst for fundraising. But as time went by, her influence increased, and so did her ability to make things happen. In the beginning, Diana's title had merely given her a platform to address others, but she soon became a person of influence in her own right. In 1996, when she was divorced from Prince Charles, she lost her title. But that loss didn't at all diminish her impact on others. Instead, it continued to increase while that of her former husband and in-laws declined, despite their royal titles and position. Why? Diana instinctively understood the law of influence. Ironically, even in death, Diana continued to influence others. When her funeral was broadcast on television and BBC radio, it was translated into 44 languages. NBC estimated that the total audience numbered as many as 2.5 billion people, more than twice the number of people who watched her wedding. Princess Diana has been characterized in many ways, but one word that I've never heard used to describe her is leader. Yet, that's what she was. Ultimately, her impact didn't come because she once had a title. She made things happen because she was an influencer, and leadership is influence. Nothing more, nothing less. People have so many misconceptions about leadership. When they find out that someone has an impressive title or an assigned leadership position, they assume that he is a leader. Sometimes that's true. But titles don't have much value when it comes to leading. True leadership cannot be awarded, appointed, or assigned. It comes only from influence, and that can't be mandated. The only thing a title can buy is a little time, either to increase your level of influence with others or to erase it. There are plenty of misconceptions and myths that people embrace about leaders and leadership. Here are 5 common ones. Number 1, the management myth. A widespread misunderstanding is that leading and managing are one and the same. The main difference between the two is that leadership is about influencing people to follow, while management focuses on maintaining systems and processes. As former Chrysler chairman and CEO Lee Iacocca Riley commented, sometimes even the best manager is like the little boy with the big dog, waiting to see where the big dog wants to go so that he can take him there. Number 2, the entrepreneur myth. Frequently, people assume that all salespeople and entrepreneurs are leaders, but that's not always the case. Often they are able to persuade people for a moment, but they hold no long-term influence. Number 3, the knowledge myth. Many people naturally assume that those who possess knowledge and intelligence are leaders, but that isn't automatically true. You can visit any major university and meet brilliant research scientists and philosophers whose ability to think is so high that it's off the charts, but whose ability to lead is so low that it doesn't even register on the charts. IQ doesn't necessarily equate to leadership. Number 4, the pioneer myth. Another misconception is that anyone who is out in front of the crowd is a leader. But being first isn't always the same as leading. And number 5, the position myth. As mentioned earlier, the greatest misunderstanding about leadership is that people think it's based on position, but it's not. Stanley Hufty affirmed, "It's not the position that makes the leader, it's the leader that makes the position." Look at what happened several years ago at Coordinate, the advertising agency formerly known as Saatchi & Saatchi. In 1994, institutional investors at Saatchi & Saatchi forced the board of directors to dismiss Maurice Saatchi, the company's CEO. What was the result? Several executives followed him out. So did many of the company's largest accounts, including British Airways and Mars, the candy maker. Saatchi's influence was so great that his departure caused the company's stock to fall immediately from 8 5/8 to $4 a share. What happened is a result of the law of influence. Saatchi lost his title and position, but he continued to be the leader. I personally learned the law of influence when I accepted my first job out of college at a small church in rural Indiana. I went in with all the right credentials. I was hired as the senior pastor, which meant that I possessed the position and title of a leader in the organization. I had the proper college degree. I had even been ordained. In addition, I had been trained by my father, who was an excellent pastor and a very high-profile leader in the denomination. It made for a good-looking resume, but it didn't make me a leader. But by the time I took my next leadership position 3 years later, I had learned the law of influence. I recognized that hard work was required to gain influence in any organization and to earn the right to become the leader. I admire and respect the leadership of my good friend Bill Hybels, the senior pastor of Willow Creek Community Church in South Barrington, Illinois, the largest church in North America. Bill says he believes that the church is the most leadership-intensive enterprise in society. A lot of business people I know are surprised when they hear that statement, but I think Bill is right. What is the basis of his belief? Position-based leadership doesn't work in a volunteer organization. Because a leader doesn't have leverage or influence, he is ineffective. In other organizations, the person who has position has incredible leverage. In the military, leaders can use rank and, if all else fails, throw people into the brig. In business, bosses have tremendous leverage in the form of salary, benefits, and perks. Most followers are pretty cooperative when their livelihood is at stake. But in voluntary organizations, such as churches, the only thing that works is leadership in its purest form. Leaders have only their influence to aid them. And as Harry A. Overstreet observed, the very essence of all power to influence lies in getting the other person to participate. Followers in voluntary organizations cannot be forced to get on board. When I recently shared that observation with a group of about 150 CEOs from the automobile industry, I saw light bulbs going on all over the room. And when I gave them a piece of advice, they really got excited. I'm now going to share that same advice with you. If you're a business person and you really want to find out whether your people are capable of leading, send them out to volunteer their time in the community. If they can get people to follow them while they're serving at the Red Cross, a United Way shelter, or their local church, then you know that they really do have influence and leadership ability. One of my favorite stories that illustrates the law of influence concerns Abraham Lincoln. In 1832, years before he became president, young Lincoln gathered together a group of men to fight in the Black Hawk War. In those days, the person who put together a volunteer company for the militia often became its leader and assumed a commanding rank. In this instance, Lincoln had the rank of captain. But Lincoln had a problem. He knew nothing about soldiering. He had no prior military experience, and he knew nothing about tactics. He had trouble remembering the simplest military procedures. For example, one day Lincoln was marching a couple of dozen men across a field and needed to guide them through a gate into another field, but he couldn't manage it. Recounting the incident later, Lincoln said, I could not for the life of me remember the proper word of command for getting my company endwise. Finally, as we came near the gate, I shouted, "This company is dismissed for 2 minutes," where it will fall in again on the other side of the gate. As time went by, Lincoln's level of influence with others in the militia actually decreased. While other officers proved themselves and gained rank, Lincoln found himself going in the other direction. He began with a title and position of captain, but that did him little good. He couldn't overcome the law of influence. By the end of his military service, Abraham Lincoln found his rightful place, having achieved the rank of private. Fortunately for Lincoln and for the fate of our country, he eventually overcame his inability to influence others. Over time and with much effort and personal experience, he became a person of remarkable influence and impact. My favorite leadership proverb is this: "He that thinks he leads but has no one following is only taking a walk." If you can't influence others, they won't follow you. And if they won't follow you, you're not a leader. That's the law of influence. No matter what anybody else tells you, remember that leadership is influence. Nothing more, nothing less.